how do you break a bad habit or maybe a not so good habit? So I'll give you two approaches to this. One is going to focus on breaking it. The other is inserting kind of a new beneficial habit in its place. So just understanding a habit, it's kind of a loop that we see in our behavior when it's a certain time of day, a certain day of the week, or even just a certain environmental trigger. You know, you see the red dot on your phone, you reach for your phone. Or maybe it's 5 o'clock and so you crack a beer. Or you see the bag of chips on the counter and you reach for the chips. In any case, something, or it can also be an internal emotion. I'm feeling stressed, so I go scroll on my phone. There's either an internal or external trigger that creates a behavior, and usually that behavior has some sort of feeling associated with it that makes you look more for that trigger, and it creates that cycle. So when we want to be kind of shifting away from maybe some bad habits, you start with this. You want to start with why is it important to you to avoid this behavior? And then you want to, if you were building a habit, the next step would be to kind of make an implementation plan. You know, at 5 o'clock, I will go to the gym for 10 minutes at the Planet Fitness beside my house, so on and so forth. So what we're talking about here is basically making contingency plans. So when that trigger, that time of day, that day of the week, that environmental thing, that internal feeling presents itself, you have one or two new strategies or behaviors you can use in its place. And the third thing is changing your environment or creating systems to make the behavior harder to do. So let's think of that maybe with an example. Let's say whenever you're feeling kind of bored or stressed, you scroll on social media for a really long time. So why is it important for you to stop that? Well, that's obviously a waste of time, but you can tie it more to your personal identity. I want to be more productive. I don't want to get addicted to this device. I don't want to waste my precious time. Whatever is important to you, why is it that you want to stop that? And then the next step again is you're basically creating a don't do plan. In other words, okay, when I feel that stress or anxiety or I'm bored and I feel my hand reaching for my phone, in that moment, what is the new plan you can do to interrupt that behavior? So it could simply be saying, well, I'm going to put down my phone and I'm going to journal my thoughts on a piece of paper for 5 minutes, or I'm going to take 5 deep breaths, or I'm going to go look at my to-do list. Like literally whatever it is that you can do instead of that habit, you're trying to kind of shift that behavior, because always you have a trigger, again, external or internal, then a behavior that feeds that trigger and creates that loop. So you're just trying to interrupt it with a new habit there. And then the third, right, is changing your environment and making systems that make it harder to do. So again, in this phone example, it could be you add in like a second password on your phone, or you have one of those app blockers, or you turn the screen to black and white mode so it's less engaging. And when you're working in the afternoon, you keep your phone away from you, right? Again, you're making it harder to do that bad habit. So the second piece of this, right, that I think is sometimes more beneficial is you can take that same thing, and we touched on that there, and you insert a new habit in its place. So starting with the same place, let's say every day, maybe in the late afternoon, you start to feel down or bored or disengaged and distracted, thinking about like something you have going on in your personal life. So first, why is it important to you that you don't feel that way so often, that you change your state, that you don't get caught up in this negative pattern? Okay, so you're going to write that down. Why is that important to your identity and your quality of life? And then you already know the trigger. Okay, so let's say it's every day around 3 or 4 o'clock. I start to worry about this relationship problem I'm having and think about this thing and get frustrated. What is a new habit you could do that when you feel that trigger at that time of day and that internal emotional trigger, what would be a new behavior you could insert in its place? When I feel that way, that triggers me to text a friend, or that triggers me to read for 10 minutes a quality spiritual self-help book that I'm working on. It triggers me to take 10 deep breaths. It triggers me to go for a walk outside around the block and enjoy the sunshine. It triggers me to write down 10 things I'm thankful for, right? Whatever it is, you're basically engineering a new habit to push out that bad habit and change how you feel. And then the final one is just changing your environment, like I said. So again, if you're thinking about the same time every day, you know this person in your life gets off of work, or you're distracted thinking about this relationship thing you're dealing with, it's like, how can you change your environment to make that less of an issue? So maybe you don't keep your phone around you, or maybe when you're working, you like block out all your distractions, or maybe you schedule meetings at that time so that you're fully focused engaging with someone and you're not like distracted thinking about this other thing. Same thing, if you have teammates you work with, you could schedule your daily meetings or co-working sessions at that time. There's a website called FocusMate that's kind of interesting, where you can like schedule blocks with people to work on your own projects in Zoom, but there's that accountability of another person there. So again, why is it important to you to avoid this? Then step 2 is either designing a plan to avoid it or designing a plan for a new habit in its place. So when I feel that internal or external trigger, what am I going to do instead? And then the third is trying to create a supportive environment, an environment that makes it so that you're limiting those triggers that prompt the bad habit, and that any new or more beneficial habit is easier to do. So I hope that helps you identify and break some of your bad habits and replace them with good ones.